Just 3 years after the end of World War II, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a milestone document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The document is a non-binding legal instrument which for the first time lists fundamental human rights protected universally. Since its adoption, the document opened the road for international recognition of human rights and served as a blueprint for many nations on the path to democracy. Ethiopia also used this document as a blueprint in the adoption of its constitution, the Constitution of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, to which it devoted more than one-third of its content to provisions on fundamental human and people's rights, including freedom of speech and religion, gender equality, and the right to speak. To commemorate the passing of the Declaration, every year on December 10, the day the Declaration was passed, Human Rights Day is celebrated, and this year it is being celebrated under the theme Dignity, Freedom, and Justice for All as a year-long campaign to commemorate the 75th year since its adoption that will take place on December 10, 2023.
The 75th anniversary of the landmark Universal Declaration on Human Rights next year must be an opportunity for action.
Despite being one of the greatest achievements by the United Nations in the 21st century, many across the globe continue to suffer from the violation of these very rights, including freedom of speech, the right to life, as well as freedom of movement. Since November of 2020, Ethiopia saw the large-scale violation of these rights in the war on Tigray. Arbitrary arrests, mass killings, torture, including the use of sexual violence as a weapon of genocide took place in Tigray, while the region was shut off from the rest of the world. The denial of entry to international journalists and rights groups has allowed for the continuation of these crimes.
The Ethiopian army and regional Amhara forces and militia then reportedly took control of Humera, allegedly killing civilians and looting the hospital, banks, businesses, supermarkets, and private houses. Artillery strikes.
We've spoken to forensic pathologists that examined photos and videos and observed bodies with gunshot wounds, one body with injuries which suggest chopping with blunt instruments.
Ethiopia. And it was terrible to see how women are being used as a weapon of war. You often hear about it, but now we could really hear about it, see it, and we could really speak to these women.
Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch released a joint report last year on the ethnic cleansing that took place in western Tigray. The report showed the grave human rights violations that were taking place in Tigray and said that atrocities committed in Tigray amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Initially, heavy fighting between the Ethiopian military with their allies against Tigrayan fighters took place around western Tigray. Electricity, banking, and telecommunications, including the internet and phone lines to Tigray, were cut off.
Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist Naima Al-Bagir also reported on the mass detention sites, campaign of torture, and execution that was taking place in Tigray, where a large number of bodies would be found in Setit River in Sudan bordering Tigray. According to the CNN report, countless bodies whose bodies had multiple signs of torture had been caught by local fishermen.
From the binds still biting into his skin, it's clear this man suffered a tortured death.
Also, those involved in the retrieval observed some bodies had their arms tied to their back with electric wires.
A Human Rights Commission was established by the United Nations in December of 2021 to investigate gross violations of human rights and atrocity crimes in the war on Tigray. The International Commission for Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, in its first ever report, said it had reasonable grounds to believe that war crimes had been committed in the war on Tigray. The Commission was denied entry into Tigray, and some investigations were conducted via online portals that left many perplexed as Tigray is under a communications blackout. The Commission's mandate was extended by a year in the hopes that on-ground investigations will take place.
We did not get access into Ethiopia. Although we had initial meetings with government of Ethiopia authorities in late July in Addis Ababa, we were not granted the access to the sites.
The obstruction of humanitarian aid into Tigray has also been one of the main features of the war on Tigray that is continuing now at the hands of Eritrean forces.
The federal government and its allies have denied some 6 million people access to basic services, which include electricity, internet, telecommunications, and banking for over 1 year. We reported that we have reasonable grounds to believe that the federal government and its allies have looted and destroyed goods indispensable for the survival of the civilian population in Tigray, by killing livestock, destroying food stores, and raising crops, while also implementing severe restrictions on humanitarian access to Tigray.
In July, an emergency directors group from headquarters was detained while trying to conduct an assessment mission in Tigray. 3 NGOs were suspended shortly thereafter. These actions are calculated to intimidate and silence, but they do not accomplish that goal. Instead, they push starving people to the brink.
Importantly, the report delves into the government's denial and obstruction of humanitarian assistance, finding that these acts are war crimes and crime against humanity of persecution.
Despite the gravity of these abuses, actions towards accountability and justice are yet to be taken by anybody so far. The signing of the peace deal in South Africa served as the first step towards a peaceful resolution of the war. But more than a month into its signing, many across Tigray continue to suffer from human rights abuses by Eritrean and other forces. In light of the Biden administration's African Leaders Summit, to be held from December 13 to 15, Human Rights Watch released an article calling for the prioritization of human rights if the administration's Africa strategy is to succeed. According to the rights group, at least 3 African leaders accused of crimes against humanity and grave human rights abuses, including Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, were invited to the summit, while invitation was not extended to Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki.